To the outside world, everyone adored Dinah Shore. Yet beneath the applause and admiration lived a woman who quietly questioned whether she deserved any of it. That doubt did not begin in adulthood. It reached back to a time before memory fully forms. In 1917, illness entered her life without warning. The diagnosis was polio, at a time when the word alone carried dread. There was no vaccine, no reliable treatment, and very little reassurance. The disease left lasting damage to her right foot and leg, shaping not only the way she walked, but the way she understood herself. Inside the Shore household, an unspoken policy took hold. It would not be discussed. Not with neighbors, not with friends, not even openly within the family. The silence was meant to protect her. Instead, it taught her something else. If weakness could not be acknowledged, it had to be outshone. So she learned to project, singing more brightly, smiling more broadly, reaching for applause as though it were a remedy. Later, when television microphones amplified every nuance of her voice in ways she felt exposed by, the discomfort cut deep. And the strain of live broadcasts, the pressure of perfection with no second chance, nearly overwhelmed her more than once. Each night she performed, she carried more than lyrics into the spotlight. The roots of that burden trace back to a small town in Tennessee. Frances Rose Shore was born on February 29, 1916, in Winchester, a leap year child whose official birthday arrived only once every 4 years. From the beginning, her story bore an unusual rhythm. Winchester was a predominantly Christian town, and her family stood among the few Jewish households there. Her parents, Solomon Shore and Anna Stein, had immigrated from Russia and built a modest life around a dry goods store. At home, she was Frances Rose, though family and friends called her Fanny. She grew up early in the awareness of difference, how quickly a small community can make you feel visible for reasons you never chose. Her older sister, Elizabeth, known as Bessie, was significantly ahead of her in age, and Fanny often felt like the smaller shadow trying to keep pace. Then, at just 18 months old, came the illness. Polio struck swiftly. The paralysis in her right leg was not merely a medical complication. It was a child's sudden discovery that her body could betray her. For her parents, it was the realization that everything they had carefully built could shift in an instant. Anna Shore refused to surrender to that future. Her response was relentless. Day after day, she administered grueling home treatments, hot packs, deep massages, painstaking exercises designed to coax life back into weakened muscles. The sessions were long and painful. Little Fanny cried often, not only from discomfort but from exhaustion. Yet her mother persisted, driven by fierce conviction. Gradually, there was progress. Not a miracle, not a complete recovery, but enough to stand, to walk, to move forward. The deformity remained. The limp would stay with her for life. But alongside the damage came a lesson. Pain could be confronted. Limitation could be challenged through sheer will. And still, the house remained quiet about it. No one mentioned the limp aloud. Conversations softened when she entered the room. Eyes flickered toward her leg and then away. It was not cruelty, but it was not freedom either. It was the kind of silence that sharpens a child's awareness. She learned to act as though she did not see what everyone else saw. Being Jewish in a town where that alone set her apart only deepened the sense of standing outside the circle. Acceptance, she decided, was not automatic. It had to be earned. Anna made sure her daughter would not retreat into caution. Swimming, tennis, activities chosen not because they were gentle, but because they demanded resilience. Movement was the point. Strength was the goal. If Fanny kept pushing, perhaps the limp would soften. Perhaps the world would see determination instead of fragility. The physical difference never disappeared. But something else took root. Whenever she sensed weakness within herself, she countered it with effort. More practice. More energy. More performance. By 1924, when Fanny was 6 years old, the family relocated to Nashville after Solomon purchased a stake in a department store. There, her father discovered a simple marketing strategy, his daughter's voice. He would lift her onto the store counter and ask her to sing for customers, often patriotic favorites like America the Beautiful. It became a daily ritual. Shoppers lingered. Conversations paused. The room turned toward her. For a child who feared being unlovable, that attention was transformative. Faces softened. Smiles widened. Applause followed. She would later confess without ornament that she felt an urgent need to be loved and believed she was difficult to love. So she performed. Not casually, not playfully. She performed as if approval might vanish if she did not secure it quickly enough. When applause begins to feel medicinal, it becomes difficult to live without it. Even as she embraced the stage, she refused to shrink from physical challenges. At Hume-Fogg High School in Nashville, she became a cheerleader, an unmistakably public role demanding stamina, visibility, and confidence. It was more than school spirit. It was a declaration. Her body did not define her limits. By 14, her appetite for performing extended beyond storefront counters and school gyms. She secured work as a torch singer in a nightclub, interpreting songs of heartbreak and longing, material far older than she was. She believed she could manage it quietly, earn some money, taste adulthood without attracting attention. But word traveled. On the evening of her debut, she stepped beneath the club's dim lights and began to sing. Then she saw them, her parents, seated close enough to witness every note, every gesture. Her parents did not interrupt the performance. They allowed her to finish the song, to collect her $10, to feel the glow of the spotlight for a few brief minutes. Only afterward did they step in and close the door on that chapter. The message was unmistakable. They were proud of her talent, but they were cautious, protective, and determined to keep control of how far it would carry her. As if to underline how closely joy and sorrow can coexist, her adolescence was marked not only by ambition but by loss. While she was still young, her mother died suddenly of a heart attack. The foundation of the household shifted overnight. Fanny and her father moved in with her sister Bessie, and the absence of Anna became a quiet presence in every room. If she had longed for love before, she longed for it even more now. Someone essential had disappeared without warning. The need to be chosen, to be reassured, to feel irreplaceable, intensified. By the time she graduated from high school in 1934, she had mastered the appearance of composure. Classmates voted her best all-around girl. From the outside, she seemed confident, admired, accomplished. Internally, the same current still ran beneath everything, a persistent drive to earn approval, to stay visible, to keep silence from settling in around her. That fall, she entered Vanderbilt University as a sociology major. On campus, she moved with deliberate momentum, as if standing still might allow doubt to catch up. She joined organizations, committees, clubs, filling her calendar until there was scarcely room to breathe. She rose to become president of her sorority, participated in fencing, and stepped into leadership roles that ensured she would not fade into the background. She even established an interfraternity and sorority a cappella competition, weaving her love of singing into the fabric of campus life. Each activity offered belonging, and belonging mattered more to her than she would ever openly admit. Music, however, remained complicated within her family. Her mother had once dreamed of becoming an opera singer, yet she held little respect for popular music and discouraged her daughter from pursuing it. Her father, too, questioned whether she possessed real talent. His doubt landed heavily, another bruise she carried quietly. Vocal lessons left her restless. The repetition and technical drills felt tedious. But resistance did not weaken her resolve. If anything, it sharpened it. When belief is withheld by those closest to you, the performance continues long after the audience has gone home. During college, she found her way into radio. She began singing on WSM in Nashville on a brief program called Rhythm and Romance. The show's theme song was titled Dinah. She interpreted it gently, infusing it with her own phrasing. Soon, the name began to follow her. She had never liked Fanny. It felt small, ill-fitting. Dinah felt different, streamlined, luminous. She understood something instinctively. In the world she hoped to enter, a name could confine you, but could also liberate you. She allowed Dinah to replace Frances Rose. It felt like stepping into a future unburdened by the past. Then came New York. Before her senior year, she traveled north to audition, convinced that determination and talent would be enough. The city answered her with indifference. Bandleader Tommy Dorsey rejected her, not for her voice, but for what she was wearing. Benny Goodman listened while eating lunch and dismissed her with barely concealed boredom. Others followed with the same verdict. Each refusal scraped against the insecurity she had been trying to outpace for years. She returned to Vanderbilt to complete her degree, but New York had already imprinted itself on her imagination. The rejection did not extinguish her ambition. It intensified it. One of the most painful moments arrived at NBC in Rockefeller Center. Called in for an audition that seemed like a true opportunity, she stood poised beside the piano. The music began. She opened her mouth, and no sound emerged. Fear seized her voice. Overwhelmed, she fled the building in tears, convinced she had confirmed every doubt her father had ever voiced. For a moment, it must have felt as though the dream was dissolving. But she did not retreat. After graduating in 1938, she returned to New York, this time without financial support from her father. She moved from one inexpensive hotel to another, each address more modest than the last. She survived on 35 cents a day for food, rationing every coin. Hunger was constant. Fatigue lingered. Still, she pressed forward. Turning back would have felt like surrendering not just a career, but herself. Opportunity arrived in unlikely form. She was invited to sing at radio station WNEW. The engagement paid nothing. It was filler material, hastily scheduled, easily forgotten. She accepted without hesitation. She needed a platform, any platform. Another struggling singer shared that same space, Frank Sinatra, equally determined, equally uncertain of what lay ahead. She would later describe him as arrogant, though perhaps it was simply the armor of a young artist fighting for survival. In those studios, everyone carried sharp edges. Fear had a way of shaping personalities. After months of scraping by, a breakthrough finally emerged. In January 1939, she secured her first steady-paying job, singing with Leo Reisman's orchestra at the Strand Theater in Brooklyn. $75 a week felt transformative. Compared to hunger, it was abundance. Soon after, Xavier Cugat invited her to record. The session paid only $20, but it marked something significant, her voice captured and sent into spaces she herself could not physically enter. Then came the turning point. An audition recording reached Eddie Cantor, one of radio's most influential personalities. In 1940, he brought her onto his NBC program and treated her not as expendable talent, but as an investment. He coached her on pacing, confidence, connection. In an industry that had often dismissed her, his belief functioned as fuel. Under his guidance, she recorded Yes, My Darling Daughter. The record gained rapid momentum, selling in remarkable numbers for its time. Almost overnight, the young woman who had once counted pennies for meals found her voice echoing across the country. Success accelerated. In 1942, her rendition of Blues in the Night became her first million seller. There was a certain irony in what followed. Tommy Dorsey, who had once rejected her, now extended an offer. This time, she declined. She chose independence, her own name above the marquee, not a supporting role in someone else's orchestra. As the decade unfolded, her catalog deepened. Buttons and Bows rose to #1 and remained there for weeks, cementing her status as a defining voice of the era. Her recordings became part of the national soundtrack. Yet she did not confine her success to recording studios and concert halls. During World War II, she toured extensively with the USO, performing for American troops overseas. She sang before vast crowds and locations still bearing the scars of battle. Years later, she would recall those moments with quiet astonishment, as though she could still feel the distance between the hungry girl in a New York boarding room and the woman standing before thousands of soldiers applauding with gratitude that felt unmistakably real. And then, in 1941, something entirely different captured her attention. It began not backstage, not in a studio, but in a movie theater. Watching The Cowboy and the Blonde, she saw actor George Montgomery on screen. Something in her shifted. Years later, she would describe the beginning of that romance with striking simplicity. She saw him, she wanted him, she despaired of ever having him, and then she married him. The sentence was almost disarming in its honesty. To the public, she radiated warmth and gentleness. But beneath that softness was resolve. When she fixed her heart on something, she did not wait for fate to deliver it. In 1941, her path shifted west when Eddie Cantor relocated his program to California. By then, George Montgomery had enlisted in the U.S. Army. It might have ended there, a brief infatuation dissolved by wartime distance. But his service kept him largely stateside. That detail, small on paper, proved decisive. He remained within reach. The place where their story truly took shape was the Hollywood Canteen. Opened on October 3, 1942, at 1451 North Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles, it was a volunteer-run club offering free entertainment, food, and companionship to enlisted men and women. The only admission required was a uniform. Dinah became a familiar presence there, singing late into the night, offering laughter and melody to young soldiers preparing to leave for uncertain futures. She returned again and again, not simply as a performer, but as a steady light in a dark time. And eventually, the man she had first admired on a movie screen noticed her not as a distant image, but as a woman standing a few feet away. When he did, it felt less like coincidence than culmination. Their courtship moved quickly. On December 5, 1943, they were married in Las Vegas. Fan magazines seized upon the union with enthusiasm, framing it as a wartime fairy tale, two striking figures finding love while the world trembled. The timing only amplified the glow. That same year, Dinah stepped further into Hollywood with her film debut in Thank Your Lucky Stars, a production tied to fundraising efforts for the Hollywood Canteen. Photographs of Dinah and George suggested promise and permanence. For a time, it was easy to believe in both. The image of perfection deepened as the years passed. On January 4, 1948, in Beverly Hills, Dinah gave birth to their daughter, Melissa and Montgomery. The public adored the narrative, a glamorous couple now complete with a child. Magazines celebrated every detail. Melissa would later make her own appearances, including on The Danny Thomas Show in 1958, reinforcing the sense of a family that belonged as much to America as to itself. In 1954, Dinah and George adopted an infant son, John David, nicknamed Jody. With a daughter and a son, the family portrait appeared balanced, whole. The public embraced the image eagerly, but polished photographs rarely reveal what stands just beyond the frame. Professionally, Dinah's ascent continued. Personally, fault lines began to form. Although she commanded radio and dominated the recording charts, her ambitions in film never fully materialized. After her debut in Thank Your Lucky Stars, she appeared in Up in Arms, Belle the Yukon, and Follow the Boys. Yet studios often position her as a featured singer rather than a leading presence. Executives quietly concluded she lacked the glamour they believed the big screen demanded. It was a subtle but persistent dismissal, an industry verdict delivered without cruelty, but with finality. She lent her voice to Disney projects such as Make Mine Music and Fun and Fancy Free, and appeared until the clouds rolled by. Still, none of it evolved into the starring trajectory she had envisioned. Her final leading film role came with Aaron Slick from Pumpkin Crick, released April 1, 1952. When it failed to leave a mark, the dream of conquering Hollywood quietly receded. She returned to the mediums that suited her best: radio, recording, and increasingly television. In those arenas, she did more than endure. She thrived. But as Dinah's star brightened, George's began to dim. By the late 1950s, the equilibrium between them shifted. George had built his career as a leading man in westerns and adventure films. Now, more frequently, he was introduced as Dinah Shore's husband. That distinction, subtle yet constant, can erode even the strongest confidence. He attempted to reclaim momentum. In 1958, he starred in the NBC series Cimarron City, portraying Mayor Matt Rockford in a frontier town shaped by family legacy. The series was short-lived. He turned next to film, including the jungle adventure Watusi, which met only modest success. Each setback tightened the sense of imbalance. What had once felt like partnership began to resemble competition, though neither openly named it. Then came distance. And distance has a way of amplifying whispers. In 1961, George traveled roughly 7,000 miles to the Philippines to produce, direct, and star in the adventure film Samar. Working alongside Israeli actress Ziva Rodin, often dubbed the Israeli Brigitte Bardot, he found himself at the center of mounting speculation. He assured Dinah he would call. The calls did not come. Silence can be louder than accusation. News reached her not through his voice, but through headlines. Reports described George and Rodin traveling from the Philippines to Hong Kong and on to Tokyo. Gossip escalated to the absurd. One story even alleged that an Italian prince had challenged George to a duel over her. The sensationalism might have been laughable had it not struck so close to home. Dinah remained in California, absorbing each rumor as it surfaced. The emotional impact was not theatrical. It was raw. She wept openly, longing not for public clarification, but for a private reassurance, a simple phone call. And beneath the shock lingered a more painful thought. This did not feel entirely new. Whispers had circulated before. Names like Diana McBain and Madeline Rue had drifted through Hollywood conversation. Those rumors cut deeply. Dinah had never constructed her identity around bombshell glamour or screen siren mystique. Her appeal rested elsewhere: warmth, accessibility, sincerity. If the marriage fractured, it would not be because she had tried to compete in the arena of cinematic beauty. It would be because the balance she had worked so tirelessly to maintain, between love and ambition, between public adoration and private reassurance, was slipping beyond her control. She was cherished for qualities that did not depend on camera angles: her voice, her warmth, the steadiness she projected into American homes week after week. Yet privately, she carried insecurities that the polished starlets of the screen never seemed to reveal. So when rumors surfaced, each new whisper linking George to another glamorous actress, they struck precisely where she was most vulnerable. At the same time, another narrative lingered in the background: long-running speculation that Dinah herself had been involved with Frank Sinatra during the 1950s. It was the kind of rumor that, once released, never entirely disappears. Whether grounded in truth or not, the mere existence of such stories gave their marriage the texture of mutual suspicion. What had once been marketed as a fairy tale now resembled a prolonged struggle conducted behind carefully drawn curtains. When George returned near the end of 1961, whatever remained between them had already fractured. On December 3, 1961, just 2 days before what would have marked their 18th wedding anniversary, Dinah publicly announced their separation. The timing carried its own quiet symbolism. 3 months later, on March 6, 1962, she filed for divorce in Los Angeles Superior Court, citing mental cruelty. The documents offered no specifics. That restraint felt deliberate. Through her representatives, she also made clear her intention to retain full custody of their children. After 18 years, the marriage formally ended. Public statements attributed the split to demanding careers and long separations. But the headlines had already painted a harsher version. In the aftermath, Dinah did what many do when grief and disappointment collide. She sought a change of air. She retreated to Palm Springs with her children, stepping back from Hollywood's relentless glare. There, she leaned into something that had long steadied her: tennis. The courts became both sanctuary and routine, a place where rhythm replaced rumor. It was during this period that she began playing doubles with Maurice F. Smith, a local building contractor. At first, their connection was casual, shared matches, easy conversation. But it deepened quickly. By 1962, they were dating. Even as the ink on her divorce papers dried, she was constructing the outline of a new life. In 1963, an art studio was built on a large lot in the Las Palmas neighborhood, serving as temporary quarters while a more expansive home was underway. Designed by architect Donald Wexler, the house promised clean lines, modern elegance, and the illusion of permanence. It was meant to symbolize stability, something solid after years of emotional turbulence. Yet new beginnings can move too quickly. On May 26, 1963, just 17 days after her divorce from George was finalized, Dinah married Maurice. From the outside, it appeared decisive, a clean break followed by a confident step forward. Inside, the atmosphere shifted almost immediately. Dinah would later describe him as controlling, saying she felt stripped of the ability to make her own decisions. She spoke cautiously of mistreatment, withholding details but not the emotional weight behind them. The marriage unraveled with startling speed. Within 7 months, it had effectively collapsed. On May 15, 1964, she filed for divorce, again citing extreme mental cruelty. This time, there was little fanfare. Few statements. Fewer headlines. The quietness suggested self-preservation. The Wexler-designed home, with its guest house, pool, and tennis court, remained. But it no longer represented renewal. It stood as a reminder that architectural beauty cannot guarantee emotional peace. Through all of this, her career continued its steady ascent. In a curious way, it was the one constant that never abandoned her. The Dinah Shore Show had premiered on NBC on November 27, 1951, as a modest 15-minute program airing twice weekly. Over time, it expanded in both length and influence, making her a familiar presence in living rooms across the country. When it evolved into the Dinah Shore Chevy Show in October 1956, the format grew to an hour-long variety spectacle. She closed episodes by blowing a kiss toward the camera, a gesture so recognizable it became part of her identity. Yet even at the height of that success, she wrestled with fear. Stage fright could unsettle her profoundly. She spoke openly about moments when anxiety tightened its grip so fiercely that it disrupted her performance. Television technology introduced another challenge: microphones that altered the texture of her voice in ways she disliked. To compensate, she leaned harder into interpretation, phrasing, acting, emotional nuance. She adapted herself to the medium rather than allowing it to diminish her. And she prevailed. Then, just as it seemed her personal life had weathered every storm it could endure, another chapter began, this time under bright studio lights. In 1970, actor Burt Reynolds appeared as a guest on her show. The chemistry was immediate, unmistakable, even with an age difference that startled observers. In a moment that blurred performance and possibility, he invited her on air to spend a weekend with him in Palm Springs. She declined in that instant, smiling. But the exchange was not the end. They met again. The spark held. Soon, the relationship became public, high-profile, unapologetic, impossible for tabloids to ignore. Dinah addressed the scrutiny simply. Chemistry, she said, mattered more than numbers. For a time, happiness seemed genuine. They divided their days between her Beverly Hills residence and her Palm Springs home, playing tennis, entertaining friends, living in a way that fed magazine covers. But even deep affection can falter against one immovable difference. Burt wanted children. Dinah had already passed that stage of her life. He proposed adoption. She declined. The disagreement was not loud or dramatic, but it was fundamental. And slowly, that single divergence grew into a wall neither charm nor devotion could dismantle. By 1975, the relationship had run its course. The separation was not theatrical, but it was final. In the years that followed, stories circulated that Burt Reynolds moved forward quickly, while Dinah absorbed the loss in private. Those closest to her would later say he had been the love of her life. If that was true, then the discipline it took to continue smiling for audiences becomes even more striking. She did what she had always done. She worked. She hosted. She maintained her composure. For years, she appeared steady, almost untouchable. Then, in 1991, she received a diagnosis that could not be outperformed: ovarian cancer. She approached it the same way she had confronted polio as a child, with resolve. Surgery followed. Then chemotherapy. The treatments were grueling, but she endured them with a quiet determination that had defined her since those early days of painful physical therapy in Tennessee. For a time, it seemed possible she might overcome it. But in the spring of 1993, the cancer returned, this time with force. She confided in only a small circle. Even then, she framed the conversation in hope rather than fear. Around that same period, after his own marriage had ended, Reynolds reportedly reached out, hoping to reconnect. Dinah declined. She did not want him to see her diminished by illness. She preferred that his last memory of her remain vibrant, alive with light rather than shadow. On February 24, 1994, Dinah Shore died at her home in Beverly Hills, surrounded by family. She was 76 years old, just 1 week shy of her birthday. In the end, her life remained defined by contrast: public radiance and private ache. Romances that seemed storybook and others that quietly fractured. A voice that reached millions, paired with a heart that never stopped searching for reassurance. Looking back, her story does not read like a fairy tale. It feels more complex than that. It feels human. A life propelled forward by ambition, resilience, and longing, continuing to move even when the applause faded and the cameras turned away.